I never thought a simple text message could make my hands tremble like that. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it just family. Those cold words came from my son, the same son I'd given a house to just months ago. It had been a quiet afternoon. The kind of afternoon where you can hear the wind in the trees and feel the heat of the sun on your face through the curtains. I was sitting by the window, my knitting needles clicking softly together, the smell of lavender in the air as it drifted from the garden I'd tended for years. A peaceful day, just as I had always imagined my old age would be. I'd worked hard for this, and now it was time to enjoy my golden years in comfort. But as I reached for my phone to check the time, I saw the notification. My son, Ryan, had sent me a message. The words on the screen seemed innocent enough at first. We need to talk. But then the next message came, and it hit me like a stone sinking into water, sending ripples of hurt through my chest. We'll be moving into your house next month. Don't worry. We'll take care of everything. My fingers froze on the screen. My heart thudded in my chest, and I felt the familiar weight of betrayal settle in. The house. My house. You see, I had given them that house. Years ago, when they were struggling, I sold it to them for next to nothing. They had 2 children, and they needed space. More than what their cramped apartment could provide. I was glad to help. After all, family was everything. I thought that by giving them the house, I was securing their future. I thought I was doing something good. But I should have known better than to trust my son, or his wife, for that matter. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made over the years. I worked 2 jobs when I was younger, saving every penny I could to give my children a better life. I scrimped and saved, never indulging myself, just so I could help them when they needed it most. And what did I get in return? Exclusion. Silence. A growing distance between us, and a place at the back of their lives, when I should have been at the heart of it. I read the message again, trying to make sense of it. Don't worry. We'll take care of everything. I could feel the coldness behind those words, the implication that I was nothing more than a tool for their convenience. I wasn't included in the decision to move in. I wasn't consulted. My feelings? Irrelevant. But I wasn't going to let them think they could walk all over me. I wasn't the same woman I once was. I had learned some hard lessons in my life, and I wasn't about to let this betrayal pass without a fight. I put the phone down slowly, my fingers trembling slightly. The house. I had worked so hard for it. And now it was going to be taken from me, not by the bank or by a stranger, but by my own flesh and blood. I took a deep breath and sat back in my chair. I could feel my pulse quicken, the anger bubbling up inside me. But this wasn't just about a house. It was about everything they had taken from me. All those years of sacrifice. All those quiet, unspoken moments when I had been pushed to the sidelines. The wind outside grew stronger, rustling the trees. I stared at the window, watching the branches sway in the breeze, as if the world was moving around me, leaving me behind. And for a moment, I let myself feel the hurt. The betrayal. The fear of losing everything. But then, something shifted. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I had lived through too much, too many hard times, too many sacrifices, to be left in the dust now. I stood up slowly, feeling the familiar ache in my joints. The pain in my knees had become worse over the years, but today, it felt different. Today, it was the pain of someone who had been knocked down, but wasn't going to stay down. I knew what I had to do. I needed to protect myself. And that meant taking control of my home, my life, and my dignity. I wasn't going to let them push me around. I wasn't going to be cast aside like an old piece of furniture. I had given too much for that. And now, it was time for me to take back what was mine. The first step would be to talk to my friend, Alice. She had been with me through thick and thin, through the tough years, through the good and bad decisions. Alice always had a way of seeing things clearly, and I needed her advice now more than ever. I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, my mind spinning with all the possibilities. I would find a way to protect myself. I would take the necessary steps to make sure I wasn't left vulnerable, exposed to their manipulations. I would make sure I wasn't taken for granted anymore. When I reached Alice's house, I felt the weight of my decision hanging over me like a heavy cloud. But Alice greeted me with her usual warmth, wrapping me in a hug before leading me to the kitchen. She could tell something was wrong, and she didn't waste any time getting straight to the point. "What happened, Ellie? You look like you've seen a ghost." I sat down at the table, my hands still shaking slightly. I told her everything. The message, the house, how I had given them everything, only to be cast aside. Alice listened quietly, her face full of concern. "You need to protect yourself, Ellie," she said gently, but firmly. "You've done enough for them. It's time for you to stop giving. You deserve better than this." The words hit me like a wave, but I knew she was right. I had given so much, and now it was time for me to take back what was mine. Alice helped me find a lawyer, and she even suggested that I hire a private investigator to look into the financial dealings of my son and daughter-in-law. Something didn't sit right with me, and I needed to know the full truth. As I left Alice's house, I felt a sense of clarity. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I wasn't going to let them take away everything I had worked so hard for. The next few days were a whirlwind. I consulted lawyers, filed papers, and took steps to protect my property. I wasn't going to be ignored anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. The feeling of empowerment was intoxicating. The more I took action, the more I felt my strength returning. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and papers being signed. I felt like I was walking through a fog, but there was a clear purpose now, a clear path I had to follow. I was determined to regain control of my life, my house, and my dignity. My son, Ryan, had no idea what was coming. He thought he could just walk in and take over. But I had plans now. Plans that would give me back what was rightfully mine. It wasn't just about the house, though. No, it was about the years of sacrifices that I had made, the moments I had missed out on, the love I had given, and the respect I had earned but never received. It was about the betrayal, the manipulation, and the lies that had built up over the years. It was about being treated like I was invisible, like I didn't matter anymore. I had worked hard my whole life, built everything I had from the ground up. I had given my children everything I could, love, support, a home when they needed it. And now, I was being pushed aside as if I were nothing more than an afterthought. I wasn't going to stand for it. As the days passed, I kept going to the lawyer's office. He was a calm man, someone who had seen many cases like mine. I could tell by the way he listened, by the way he took notes, that he understood. He didn't judge me, didn't question my decisions. He just did his job, and that gave me comfort. But there was something about the whole process that made my stomach churn. I had spent my entire life trusting my family, believing that they would always be there for me. I never thought that one day, I would have to fight for my own rights. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table looking over some papers, my phone rang. It was Ryan. I almost didn't answer. My instinct was to let it ring out, to ignore him, but something in me told me that I needed to hear what he had to say. I took a deep breath and swiped the screen. "Mom, we need to talk." Ryan's voice came through the speaker, thick with irritation. "You're overreacting. It's just a temporary thing, okay? We need a place to stay, and we thought this would be easiest. You don't need to be so dramatic." Dramatic? My heart slammed against my chest as his words sunk in. It was so typical of him, wasn't it? To downplay everything, to turn the tables and make it seem like I was the one causing trouble. He always had a way of making things seem like it was my fault, like my feelings didn't matter. "Ryan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't get it. This isn't about you needing a place to stay. It's about respect. It's about me. You and your wife have taken so much from me already. You've excluded me, ignored me, and now you want to take the one thing that has been mine. My home. My sanctuary." I could hear the silence on the other end of the line as he processed my words. Then he sighed, a sound full of frustration. "Mom, please stop. This is getting out of hand. You're acting like we're doing something terrible to you. We're family." I could feel the anger building in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I had spent my life letting my emotions control me, but not anymore. Not now. I had control over this situation, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You've been taking from me for years. You've manipulated me, used me, and now you've crossed a line. I'm not going to let you do this anymore. I will be protecting my rights from here on out. I'm taking steps to make sure my home stays mine." There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head, the disbelief that his mother was standing up to him, that I wasn't going to just roll over this time. "You don't have to do this, Mom," he said finally, his voice softer now. "You're being unreasonable." "No, Ryan," I replied, my voice clear and unwavering. "You've been unreasonable. You and your wife have taken advantage of me long enough. It's time for you to learn that I won't be your doormat anymore." I hung up the phone with a quiet finality. My heart was racing, but I wasn't scared. I was proud of myself. I had said what needed to be said. I had stood my ground, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of empowerment. I spent the next few hours going through my documents with the lawyer, making sure everything was in order. There were so many papers to read, so many contracts and legal jargon that I had to familiarize myself with. But with each passing moment, I felt more and more confident. I was doing the right thing. I was protecting myself. The next step was to confront my daughter-in-law, Emily. She was the one who had convinced Ryan to make the decision without consulting me. She was the one who had always made me feel like I was invisible, unimportant. It was time to face her. I invited her over for tea the next day. She arrived promptly, her usual polished smile in place. I could tell that she thought this was going to be a casual chat, that everything would go as planned. But I had other ideas. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had spent countless hours watching my grandchildren play, where I had hosted birthday parties and family gatherings. The room felt different now, heavy with unspoken tension. "Emily," I began, my voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about your request to move into my house. And I've decided that it's not happening. This house is mine, and I've made it clear to Ryan that I won't allow it." Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "But Ellie," she began, trying to sound sweet, "we need a place to stay. The kids need a stable environment." "I understand that," I replied, "but that doesn't mean you can take advantage of me. You've taken so much already, and now you want to take my home, too?" Her eyes flashed with annoyance, but I held my ground. "I've been more than generous with you and Ryan. But I won't be your pawn anymore. I'm protecting myself, and I suggest you both start thinking about the consequences of your actions." For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. It was brief, but it was there. And that gave me hope. Maybe, just maybe, they would finally understand that I wasn't someone to be pushed aside. As Emily left, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The battle was far from over, but I had taken the first step. I had stood up for myself. And in that moment, I realized that I was more than just a grandmother, more than just a mother. I was a woman who had lived through enough to know her worth. And no one, not even family, could take that from me. The days after my confrontation with Emily passed slowly, and yet, so much had changed. There was an unfamiliar calmness in my heart, a quiet peace that hadn't been there before. I'd spoken my truth, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just a passive observer in my own life. I was in control. But I could feel the tension in the air. My phone was silent for days after that conversation. No messages from Ryan. No calls from Emily. I knew they were likely stewing, trying to figure out how to manipulate me into backing down. They wouldn't get that chance. Not this time. I focused on the paperwork, the lawyer, the investigator. I was building my defense, brick by brick, with every passing day. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my dignity, my rights, and reclaiming my independence. This wasn't just a fight for property. It was a fight for respect. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, a cool breeze brushing past me, I received an unexpected call from my lawyer, Michael. His voice was calm but urgent. "Ellie, I think we've found something you need to know." My pulse quickened. What do you mean? We've been looking into the financial records, as you asked, and we've uncovered something concerning. It seems your son and daughter-in-law have been diverting money from your joint accounts for the last few months. Not much at first, but the amounts are growing. My breath caught in my throat. The betrayal stung worse than I ever could have imagined. It was one thing for them to take my house, but to take money that was supposed to be for emergencies, for my future, for my retirement, that was something else entirely. Is it enough to take action? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Enough to get the authorities involved, Michael replied. We need to move quickly. Ellie. This is serious. I could feel the blood rush to my head. My legs felt weak, but I steadied myself against the railing. How could they do this to me? After everything I'd done for them, everything I'd given, they had taken from me again. My mind raced, but I kept my composure. I had fought too hard, for too long, to let them get away with it. Do whatever you have to do, I told Michael, my voice strong. I'm ready. After the call ended, I sat in silence, my hands clenched tightly around my cup of tea. A part of me had known something was wrong, something had felt off, but to hear the truth so clearly, it was a blow to my heart. Still, I didn't let myself crumble. Not now. Not when I was so close to regaining what was rightfully mine. I didn't hear from Ryan that day. Or the next. But on the third day, just as I was preparing to leave for another lawyer's appointment, I received the call I had been expecting. It was Ryan. His voice, strained and cold, came through the phone. Mom, we need to talk. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I stayed calm, my voice firm. Ryan, I've already told you everything I need to. You've crossed a line. You and Emily both have. I don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly, though I could hear the tension in his voice. This is about family, Mom. We've been going through a tough time, and we thought you'd understand. I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my cool. Understand? Understand that you've been stealing from me? Understand that you've been manipulating me, using me for your own benefit? There was a long pause on the other end. The silence spoke volumes. I could hear Ryan shifting, probably avoiding eye contact, probably feeling the weight of my words pressing down on him. Look, I didn't know Emily was taking money, he said, his voice sounding defensive now. But we need that house. It's our only option. No, Ryan, I said, my voice unwavering. You don't need that house. You've never needed it. You've been using me, and I'm done letting you do that. I've made arrangements. I've secured my rights. And if you think you're going to walk in here and take everything I've worked for, you're wrong. He went silent again. I knew he was trying to figure out what to say next, how to spin the situation in his favor. But I wasn't going to let him. Not anymore. I've consulted lawyers. I've hired an investigator, I continued, letting the words sink in. You and Emily have been taking from me, and I'm not going to let it continue. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. I don't want this to get ugly, Mom. You're still my mother. I still love you. Then stop treating me like I'm worthless, I replied, my voice cold. Love means respect. It means honoring boundaries. And you haven't done that. I won't allow you to manipulate me anymore. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. Fine. If that's how you want it, then we're done. The line went dead. For a long moment, I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of the conversation slowly sinking in. But something in me, something deep inside, told me that this was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment I had been building toward. For years, I had let Ryan take advantage of me. I had let him manipulate me with guilt, with promises of love that had no substance. I had let Emily convince me that I didn't deserve better. But no more. I had finally found the strength to stand up for myself. The pain of losing my son, of realizing that I had to let go of him, was immense. But I also felt a sense of relief. I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't fighting for the approval of people who didn't respect me anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for my independence. I was fighting for me. Later that evening, I sat in the living room, the quiet of the house surrounding me. I thought about all the memories, the birthdays, the holidays, the family gatherings, the years of love and sacrifice. But those moments felt distant now, as if they belonged to another person, another time. A time when I had believed that family would always be there. But now, I was no longer defined by what I had given. I was no longer defined by their expectations of me. I was Ellie, a woman who had lived through hardship and emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more determined than ever before. And as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the window, I smiled to myself. I had taken the first step toward freedom. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready. I had taken back control. And nothing, no one, could take that from me. The days after my confrontation with Ryan felt like a strange kind of waiting. There was no immediate resolution, no sudden shift in the family dynamics. But something inside me had shifted irrevocably. I wasn't waiting for my son's approval anymore. I wasn't clinging to the idea of family as it once was. Instead, I was focusing on the future, on my future. And for the first time in a long time, that future felt full of possibility. The calls and messages from Ryan and Emily stopped coming for a while. It was as if they were giving me space, perhaps hoping I would soften, maybe even cave. But I knew better than to expect them to suddenly become understanding, or to feel any remorse. They had been living off my kindness for too long, and now, it seemed, they had underestimated how much I was willing to fight back. The lawyer, Michael, continued his work, quietly gathering the evidence I needed. He was thorough, and every day, it seemed, we uncovered more lies, more financial misdeeds. I was no longer surprised by the depth of their deceit. It was clear now that their plans for my house were not just about a place to stay. No, they wanted to make it their own, to erase me from it entirely, to remove me from the equation. At first, the realization had been crushing. The betrayal had come from my own flesh and blood. But as time passed, I realized that their actions had freed me in a way. The truth had stripped away the illusion of family love, and now I could see things clearly. I could see who they really were. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, I decided to take a walk. The air was cool, and I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, the soft fabric comforting me in a way that words never could. As I walked down the quiet streets of my neighborhood, I let my mind wander, thinking of all that had transpired. I thought of the times I had felt so small, so insignificant in their eyes. I thought of how easily they had taken from me, assuming I would always be there to clean up their messes, to bail them out. And how quickly I had let it happen. I had allowed myself to become invisible, to be used. But not anymore. I stopped in front of the park near my house, taking in the sight of the children playing on the swings and the old men sitting on the benches, chatting away like time hadn't passed. I watched as a couple walked hand in hand, their faces full of warmth, their laughter echoing in the crisp evening air. The simplicity of it all struck me deeply. Life had a way of moving forward, of continuing on no matter what. And I, too, had to move forward. I realized then that it wasn't just about my house. It wasn't just about the money or the betrayal. It was about my peace of mind, my right to live the rest of my years with dignity, without fear of being manipulated or controlled by those who claimed to love me. The house would be settled. My future would be settled. But the most important thing was that I was finally free. Free from the toxic patterns that had defined my relationships for so long. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over me. The darkness of the room seemed less intimidating now, the silence more comforting. I could hear the faint rustle of the wind outside, the steady rhythm of the world continuing on. I felt no more fear, no more uncertainty. There was just peace. The next morning, I received a call from Michael. He had the latest update on the case. I braced myself, ready for whatever news he had. When I answered, he wasted no time. "Ellie, we've found everything we need. The evidence is solid. We can move forward with filing for legal action. This will put a stop to everything." A wave of relief washed over me. It was finally happening. The legal process, the confrontation, the fight for my dignity and rights, It was all coming to fruition. I had spent so many years feeling like a victim, wondering if I was ever going to be heard, if I was ever going to matter. Now, I knew I had mattered. And now they would know too. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "Let's do this." Over the next few days, Michael filed the necessary paperwork, and the investigators continued to gather information on Ryan and Emily's financial dealings. Every move we made was calculated, precise. I was no longer reacting out of pain or anger. I was acting with purpose, with clarity. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. I couldn't help but think about all the years I had spent giving. I had done it out of love, out of duty, thinking that I was helping my children build a better life. And yet, the more I gave, the more I lost. I had been generous, yes, but I had also been naive. It wasn't until I started to protect myself, to set boundaries, that I finally started to regain what had been taken. The next step in the process was to confront them with the truth. I would have to meet with Ryan and Emily, armed with all the evidence I had gathered. It would be a confrontation, yes, but I was no longer afraid. I had stood up for myself, and now, I would make sure they understood that I would not be manipulated anymore. When the day came, I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm. I had expected the anxiety, the dread that usually accompanied these kinds of confrontations, but it didn't come. I was prepared. I was strong. And I would not be silenced. Ryan and Emily arrived at my house late in the afternoon. They were both quiet, hesitant, as if they weren't sure what to expect. But I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. "Sit down," I said, my voice firm as I gestured to the chairs across from me. "We need to talk." They exchanged a glance before sitting, their faces tight, but I could tell they were nervous. This was it. They were about to face the consequences of their actions. "I found out everything," I said, leaning forward slightly, my hands resting on the table between us. "The financial records. The money you've taken. The way you've tried to manipulate me." Ryan's face turned pale, his jaw tightening. Emily looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You've been using me for your own gain," I continued, my voice unwavering. "And I'm done letting you." Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I've already taken the necessary steps. I've contacted the authorities. This is over." For a moment, there was complete silence. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but Ryan remained frozen, his face flushed with anger and shame. I could see the realization sinking in. "You thought you could take everything from me," I said softly. "But what you didn't realize is that I wasn't just going to let it happen. Not anymore. I fought too hard for what I have." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. A final, satisfying click, like a lock turning in place. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "I'm done being your doormat," I said firmly, standing up from the table. "You won't take from me again." Ryan and Emily said nothing more. The damage had been done, and they both knew it. As I watched them leave, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was finally over. I had taken back my life. And as the door closed behind them, I realized that I was no longer the woman I had once been, the woman who had given endlessly, the woman who had been taken for granted. I was stronger now. I was whole. And nothing, not even family, would ever take that away from me again. The weeks that followed were a mix of quiet victory and lingering uncertainty. The legal process continued, slowly but steadily. I had taken all the necessary steps, and now there was no turning back. Ryan and Emily avoided me. No calls, no visits, no attempts to make amends. I wasn't surprised. They had always expected me to just let things slide, to forgive them for their disregard of me. But now they were the ones on the defensive, and I felt no pity for them. In the silence, I found a strange sense of peace. I didn't have to fight anymore. The battle had already been won. But still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Would I be able to maintain this sense of control? Would they try to pull something behind my back? The questions lingered in my mind, but they didn't have the same weight as they once did. I had already proven to myself that I was capable of standing my ground. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the house, I caught sight of the photo album on the shelf. It had always been there, a relic of happier times, birthdays, weddings, holidays. The pictures captured memories of the family I thought I knew, the family I thought I could trust. I ran my fingers over the worn leather cover, and a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I opened the album slowly, flipping through the pages. There was Ryan, a smiling child in my arms, his little hands gripping mine tightly. There were the family dinners, the laughter echoing through the house. It was hard to believe that the same boy who had once looked at me with such love and trust was the one who had betrayed me so profoundly. I paused on a photo from a family vacation. We had gone to the beach, just the four of us. Me, Ryan, his wife Emily, and their children. I remembered the warmth of the sun, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, and the way we all laughed together as we built sandcastles. At the time, it felt like the perfect family. But now, as I looked at the picture, all I saw was the illusion of that happiness. The reality was that they had used me for years. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone in their eyes, someone to take from when it was convenient and to discard when they no longer needed me. I closed the album with a soft sigh, a part of me reluctant to let go of those memories. But I knew it was time. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of family that no longer existed. The reality was different now. And I had to face that, no matter how painful. Later that evening, I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the world outside. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling softly. It was a peaceful moment, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly alone. Not lonely, but alone in the way that I had needed. I wasn't hiding from anything anymore. I wasn't running from the truth. I was standing firmly in my own life. The phone rang, breaking the silence. I glanced at it, but I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to pick up the call. Not anymore. Whoever it was would leave a message if they truly needed to speak with me. But the caller ID caught my attention. It was Alice. I had grown to depend on Alice over the years. She was more than a friend. She was a sister in every way that mattered. She had been the one who helped me find the strength to stand up for myself, to protect what was mine. Alice had seen me through all the highs and lows, and now, as I sat in this new chapter of my life, I knew that her friendship was one of the few things that remained unchanged. I picked up the phone. "Ellie," she said warmly on the other end, "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" I smiled as I sat back in my chair. "I'm doing all right. Better than I expected, actually." "That's good to hear. I know this has been a tough time for you. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You've done something I've been hoping you'd do for years." I chuckled softly. "I didn't do it alone, you know. You were there for me every step of the way." "That's what friends are for," Alice replied with a knowing tone. "But you did the hard part, Ellie. You stood up for yourself. You took control of your life. And that's something worth celebrating." Her words felt like a bomb on a wound I hadn't realized was still there. Alice had always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. She was the voice of reason when I needed to hear it, the shoulder to cry on when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear. We talked for a while longer, catching up on the small details of life. Her voice was soothing, and I found myself relaxing into it, feeling the tension leave my body bit by bit. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there were people who cared, people who would stand by me no matter what. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, my thoughts swirling. The fight wasn't over, there were still legal steps to take, still the final confrontation with Ryan and Emily to come, but I felt more at peace than I had in ages. I had made the choice to protect myself. And that was a choice I would never regret. The next morning, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wasn't expecting any visitors, but when I opened the door, there stood my neighbor, Mrs. Parker. She was holding a small potted plant, and her face was filled with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Hello, Ellie," she said kindly. "I thought I'd bring you this. I know you've been going through a lot lately." I was taken aback by her gesture. Mrs. Parker had always been friendly, but we had never been particularly close. Still, her warmth touched me, and I invited her in. As we sat in the living room, chatting about the neighborhood and catching up on life, I found myself feeling grateful for the people who still cared. I wasn't alone. Not really. Yes, I had lost a great deal: trust, security, even family. But in this quiet house, surrounded by the things that I had worked so hard for, I realized that I still had so much. The betrayal hurt, but it had also brought clarity. I wasn't the person I had been before. I was someone stronger, someone who had learned that love didn't mean sacrificing yourself for others. Love meant respect. It meant boundaries. And I had finally found the strength to say no. When Mrs. Parker left, I returned to my chair by the window, my heart full of a quiet contentment. The day was fading into dusk, and I could feel the warmth of the sun as it dipped below the horizon. The house was still, the air calm. For the first time in years, I felt that I could finally breathe. I had taken back what was mine. I had fought for my rights. And most importantly, I had fought for my peace. Days passed, and the legal process unfolded. Ryan and Emily eventually realized I wasn't backing down. Their calls became more frequent, but now, I was no longer the woman they could control. When they tried to manipulate me into a compromise, I stood firm. I wasn't asking for an apology anymore. I was claiming what I had rightfully earned. As the final hearing approached, I sat in my living room, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. No more lies. No more manipulation. I had faced the storm, and now I stood tall, empowered, free, and finally at peace. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I woke up with a sense of quiet resolve. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft shadows across the room. For a moment, I allowed myself to savor the stillness, the calm before the storm. I had done everything I could, and now, it was time to face the consequences of Ryan and Emily's actions. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I got dressed slowly, taking my time. I chose a simple dress, one that made me feel strong, yet comfortable. I had spent so many years feeling like a shadow in my own life, letting others dictate my worth. But today, I would walk into that courtroom as the woman I was now, strong, unapologetic, and no longer willing to tolerate disrespect. As I made my way to the courthouse, memories of my life with Ryan and Emily flashed through my mind. I thought of the years I had spent giving, loving, sacrificing for them. The room was quiet. My words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of my heartbeat. I could feel the weight of everything I had been through, but there was a sense of clarity now. This wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about reclaiming my right to live on my own terms. The judge listened carefully, taking in the evidence. He asked a few questions, but the decision was clear. I had won. The house would remain mine, and Ryan and Emily would have to face the consequences of their actions. I hadn't just won in the courtroom. I had won my life back. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long seemed to lift. The sun was brighter now, the air fresher. I could feel the tension in my body melting away, replaced by a sense of freedom that I hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I wasn't just the mother who had given everything to her children. I wasn't just the grandmother who had been taken for granted. I was a woman who had fought for herself, who had taken back what was rightfully hers. And as I walked down the steps of the courthouse, I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I had learned something important. I was worthy of love, respect, and peace. And no one, could take that from me again. It's funny how, in the midst of everything, you can still find moments of peace. After the final hearing, after everything had been decided, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I thought I would feel elation or relief, but instead, it was peace. A quiet, steady peace that filled every part of me. The battle had been long and difficult, but in the end, I had emerged victorious. I had reclaimed my home, my rights, and most importantly, my peace of mind. But I wasn't finished yet. I had spent so many years putting others before myself, always thinking that family would be there for me, that love was enough to cover over any hurt. The truth was, love alone didn't guarantee respect. It didn't ensure you wouldn't be taken for granted. I had spent so much time thinking that my sacrifices for them were a gift. But I was wrong. Those were my choices, yes, but I had allowed them to take more than what was offered. And I had allowed myself to shrink in the process. Now, I was going to rebuild. Not just the physical space of my house, but my own sense of self. I had learned through this ordeal that setting boundaries wasn't a betrayal. It was a form of self-care. It was my way of saying, I matter too. And for the first time in years, I was beginning to believe it. The days after the court hearing were full of small, everyday things. I had dinner with Alice, something I hadn't done in a while, and we laughed and reminisced about old times. We talked about life, about how easy it was to lose sight of yourself when you were constantly taking care of others. Alice reminded me that it wasn't too late to rediscover what I wanted for myself, to pursue passions I had put on hold. And I realized how right she was. I started doing things just for me. I dusted off my old paints, the ones I had tucked away in the closet years ago, and started sketching again. It wasn't about creating a masterpiece. It was about creating something that was entirely mine, something that reflected my own thoughts, my own spirit. I began volunteering at the community center, helping out with crafts for the local children. It was something I had always wanted to do but had never found the time for. Watching the kids' faces light up when they saw the projects we made together reminded me that I still had so much to offer. That I was capable of making a difference, even in small ways. It was fulfilling in ways I hadn't realized I'd been missing. In time, I reached out to Ryan. Not because I expected anything from him, but because I realized that holding on to anger only hurt me. I didn't want to stay angry forever. I had forgiven him, in my heart, even if I couldn't forget. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about letting go of the pain so I could fully embrace my own future. Ryan apologized, though it was hesitant, and perhaps too little too late. But I accepted it, not for him but for me. I didn't need his forgiveness or approval to move on. But it did feel like another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. There was no more resentment. Just peace. As I sat by the window one evening, watching the sun set, I thought about how far I had come. I had spent so many years living for others, but now I was living for myself. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also set me free. I had spent so many years looking outside for validation, waiting for my family to recognize me, to love me the way I had always wanted. But the real love came from within. I had finally learned how to give that to myself. And with that love, everything else began to fall into place. The house, my home, had been a symbol of everything I had worked for. It had been taken from me, then returned to me, and now it represented something more. It represented my journey, my resilience, my ability to stand up for myself. And with it, I had regained something even more precious than property. I had reclaimed my own self-respect. Now, as I sat in the quiet of my home, knowing the hardest part was behind me, I smiled to myself. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine to travel. And that was enough.